Hi, Motheo. It's Juliet here. I've heard a lot about tax-free savings accounts, and I know they're meant to be a good thing, but I'm not always clear on how they're different from things like unit trusts or regular savings accounts, and how they really fit into a long-term plan. How should I be thinking about them?
Thank you for that great question, Juliet. Welcome to today's episode of Everything Counts. Tax-free savings accounts are familiar to many South Africans, but they're often misunderstood. They're talked about as savings, but in reality, they behave very differently to the money we keep aside for day-to-day needs and emergencies. In this episode, we're going to unpack what tax-free savings really are, how they differ from other investment options, and how to use them in a way that genuinely supports your long-term financial future. Welcome to Everything Counts, the podcast where we have the money conversations that matter, how to save it, how to grow it, how to protect it, and how to make it work for you. On Everything Counts, we share the information you need to get your financial ducks in a row. Hello, I'm Motheo Khoaripe, your host, and joining me today are Vumi Dludlu, Investec Financial Advisor, and Johan Loubser, Head of Advisor Enablement at Investec. Welcome back to Johan, and for the first time, welcome to Vumi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. When we talk about tax-free savings, before we get into the technicalities, why were they introduced in the first place?
Motheo, I think to start off with maybe just a bit of background. So tax-free savings were introduced in March 2015. So they've been around for over a decade, and they were made available to SA tax residents, so people that live in South Africa, as well as minors. And the reason that they were created was to encourage household savings.
And Vumi, just to get a sense of what this idea is in terms of tax-free savings account, it's more long-term, right? To encourage South Africans or anyone who looks to invest in these type of vehicles to be in it for the long game.
Absolutely. With compounding interest and market returns, the patience of sticking it through the long game is crucial. So the tax-free savings account wasn't intended to be another transactional savings account. That's far from it. The real benefit comes from long-term, uninterrupted growth.
When we talk about South Africa's savings culture, it's not the best, as we all know. So this would be one of those that was an ideation to make sure that a lot of people get a chance to put away money over a long term, as you've already mentioned. But when we talk about tax-free savings, they're often compared to things like unit trusts or ordinary savings accounts. How do they differ?
So when we look at tax-free savings, and to go back to the earlier point of encouraging household savings, there had to be incentive to do that. So tax-free savings was created to build long-term wealth, and the incentive to do that is that no tax will be charged on any growth. So the easiest way to understand that is to compare that to the alternative. When you invest in a savings account, you place your money there for emergencies, you invest in a unit trust or retirement annuity, there's always tax applicable in different ways. So within a tax-free savings, you don't pay tax on interest, which would be generated out of something like a savings account. You don't pay tax on dividends, which is earned from equity or owning shares, where dividends are declared, and there's no capital gains tax. All of these things will be applicable in other investment and savings accounts. So ultimately, the incentive was that because there's no tax payable, it makes it more lucrative and easier to create long-term wealth.
So a regular savings account would have tax implications?
Yes, of course. The tax-free savings account is different in that sense. And what really matters is the type of investment you hold. And as Johan has mentioned, it could be held in cash, it could be held as a unit trust, and it could be invested as an ETF. But the main focus should be the tax treatment is the same. The outcome is not.
Now, when we look at, the savings account itself, in your overall portfolio, somebody might be convinced to say, okay, of all these things, where's this one going to sit exactly?
The first point would be to look at the need that you're trying to solve before we get to the actual product. So if your need is to put away money for emergencies, you would look at that need and then see what is appropriate. So if we hone in on tax-free savings, this probably does not sit in the first bucket as an emergency savings.
So you're not going to withdraw.
That should not be the intention. So when we go back to the principle of the need, I think the need that matches tax-free savings should be to save for long term, invest for the long term, and hopefully use this as part of your retirement planning. And retirement planning can sometimes be associated with only retirement savings vehicles like retirement annuities or pension funds, but tax-free savings do play a massive role in the advantages that they offer for retirement.
So these are complementary, right? But also a good complementary because over time, you benefit as a person that's saving.
Absolutely. And unlike retirement funds, tax-free savings don't reduce your taxable income today, but they do eliminate tax on growth over time.
Do you pair them with what you already have? Because you were saying they're not an emergency fund, so not something you can directly get access to immediately. You're planning over time. So what would you pair them with when you're talking about unit trusts and other savings vehicles?
So when we look at a client's investment portfolio as a whole, we spoke around emergency funds, and the objective of that being is that should a need for capital arise, you've earmarked funds for that. In doing that, you allow other investments such as your retirement annuities, your pension fund, and your tax-free savings to remain untouched. So if we think of a tax-free savings, how that differs from a retirement product is in liquidity at retirement. So typically with things like retirement annuities or pension funds, at retirement specifically, you've got access to a portion of them, not the full amount. So access is restricted. Where tax-free savings comes in is in two places. So number one, you've got full access to a tax-free savings, both pre-retirement, so from the day that you start up until the day that you get to retirement, and post that. The intention should not be to use it in that manner, but it does create liquidity if you need a lump sum, if you need to supplement your income from other sources. And the added benefit to that is that it happens in a very, very tax-efficient manner.
That balance is important, and it's why tax-free savings are best used as part of the broader plan and not used as a fallback.
Let's talk about the roles then, because I've had conversations with my own friends who say, I don't have 36,000 Rand to save every month. And I'm like, no, you don't come in that high. There's a lot of confusion around how it works. How would you explain it to somebody, maybe even a 5-year-old, to say, this is how much you put away and these are the limitations and this is what you're allowed to do?
So let's start with the basics. You are allowed to contribute 36,000 Rand per year. And when I say per year, I'm referring to tax year, not calendar year, which is quite an important differentiation. And that 36,000 Rand per year, you can do that until you've reached a lifetime limit of 500,000.
So no more than 500,000.
No more than 500,000 Rand for contributions. So if you started from day one, it would have taken you around 15 years to get to that mark. So 2015 to where we are today, we're not completely there yet, but we're getting quite close. At that point, the contribution limit was a little bit lower at 30,000. But if you started today with the contribution limit at 36, it would take you approximately 13.5 to 14 years to reach that 500,000 Rand lifetime limit.
And that can sound like it's a lot of money, but if you reframe it, that's essentially 3,000 Rand a month or 99 Rand per day. And that goes a long way. Very doable.
So somebody will say, I'll put it away for a very long time. It's obviously compounding. Do I not get to the 500,000 while the money is compounding, or is it a matter of just the contributions? Even if it grows, it doesn't affect.
So the growth on your tax-free savings in principle will be determined by what you invest in. So Vumi mentioned earlier that you can have a fixed deposit product where there's a fixed interest rate. You can invest in the market, whether that's locally, offshore. So the growth that you receive on your contributions will be dependent on what you invest in. And the limit only applies to contributions, not your value. Your value can grow well in excess of 500,000. So I think if we bring it back, primary goal, maximize that 500,000 Rand as quickly as you can, which we understand is 13.5 to 14 years, and let that grow over time tax-free.
And this is, having time in the game, right? When you talk about investing, how important is it to get in early, but also to stay? Just forget about it and set it up and leave it to grow over time.
One of my favorite things to say is the best time to start is now. Time is your best friend, especially when it comes to long-term investments such as a tax-free investment. It's so crucial to understand that you cannot catch up last year's contribution in the following tax year. So, for example, if you only put in 30,000 Rand last year, you cannot invest 42,000 in this tax year.
So then it's 36 every tax year.
Yes, correct. So it's 36,000 Rand every tax year and not every calendar year.
So the opportunity given, you must take it.
And Vumi, to add to your point, planning around this is quite crucial because we all get busy with our daily lives. And before you know it, we are in the middle of February and it's the end of the tax year. And maybe you haven't done your contribution. So I think a very important thing is planning how you are going to maximize this. And for me personally, the easiest way to do this is to automate it. You mentioned 99 Rand a day. I think 99 Rand a day is a little bit more difficult to automate into an investment, but you can build up that 99 Rand a day and then have a debit order running of 3,000 Rand per month. That way you never have to be concerned around what's my limit, how much do I have left, do I need to top up? So that automation takes care of it. But you also have to look at what is doable for you. Is that a debit order? Is that a lump sum? Is it a combination? But I think planning around how you are going to maximize that 36,000 Rand per tax year is quite important.
So let's say for somebody who's listening to you now and says, you're right, I should be starting now, and they are towards the end of a tax year, how would that work? Would they have to have a lump sum, for instance, to cover that tax year, or just start with the minimal amount that they are able to afford?
I think both points that you've mentioned are really important. So to Johan's point earlier, it's crucial for you to do what's suitable for you. However, when you are drawing closer to the end of the tax year, being end of February, you want to have in mind that doing the whole lump sum of 36,000 Rand puts you in a better position because you get the whole benefit of the compounding interest in the year ahead. And then you can also then do your lump sum on the 1st of March, which also gives you that compounding effect for the rest of that tax year.
Now, a lot of people, for many different reasons, might want to move their money from one tax-free savings account to another provider. Is this firstly allowed, and how would that work?
The first principle around moving tax-free savings, I think what we need to understand is that when you withdraw from your tax-free savings, and withdraw being a fairly specific type of instruction that you give, so it pays out to you in cash, you cannot replace that contribution. So what that means is if you've contributed 36,000 Rand for the year, you now make a withdrawal of 16,000 Rand. You can't put another 16,000 Rand back for that tax year. Okay, so we can't replace contributions that's already been made. So when it comes to transferring, it's very important that we do a transfer, not a disinvestment or a withdrawal and a reinvestment, because that will impact your lifetime contributions, given that we can't replace any previous contributions.
And who's tracking this movement of money? Is it my responsibility as an investor to just track the amount that I've put in over time and whether I'm close to that 500,000 Rand threshold?
It is your responsibility as the investor, and I suppose that's why it's important to make sure that if you do have different tax-free investments, whether it's a tax-free fixed deposit or tax-free savings with different in different places, that you're keeping track of that. So it's often best practice to have all your investments in one house.
What's also a very important thing to remember is that the 36,000 Rand limit is applicable to you as an individual, not per platform or per product. So you can have multiple tax-free savings, but you can't contribute more than 36,000 Rand collectively to them in a tax year.
Learning everything we need to know around tax-free savings accounts from Vumi and Johan. Let's get more insights after this.
Planning ahead should feel simpler. With the new Save and Invest journey on Investec Online and the app, you can explore savings and investment options in one easy place, from tax-free savings to other ways to invest for the future. Browse, compare, and learn more as you go. Find Save and Invest in the app or on Investec Online and start exploring.
Welcome back to Everything Counts. We're talking everything tax-free savings, this time just tackling that point of children. When people plan for those little people that are in our lives, who also want to make sure their financial futures are secured. So how can you do that using a tax-free savings account?
Tax-free savings can be a powerful way to set up your child financially. Kids have more time than we do, and that's just the reality. But there's an important long-term consideration for parents. The account is linked to your child as an individual. What that means is any contribution you make for your child, up to that 500,000 Rand lifetime contribution, your child cannot do over and above that. So as a parent, what the tax-free investment is then used for is incredibly crucial.
So if I were to take out 2 for my little kids and I get them to 300 and 200,000 respectively, when they decide they want to have a tax-free savings account, that's where they start until they get to 500,000 as a threshold.
Motheo, I think another important thing to add on to your question is that when children are minors, their parents act on their behalf. So they don't have any legal capacity. So you as a parent will act on behalf of your child and have the ability to invest on their behalf and also withdraw on their behalf. And I think where the key principle comes in is if the tax-free savings is used and you withdraw funds from it while your kid is a minor, you act on their behalf. So when they reach 18 or 21 and they want to start investing, you've made that decision for them and they will then have lost out on their lifetime limit.
But the interesting thing is if you get to that threshold, let's say when they're 15 and they leave the money as is for many years, this can start them on the journey of creating that generational wealth.
That's exactly the goal with tax-free savings for your children. Because the benefit lies over the long term, and kids have a very, very long term, especially if you start early on, it can really set them up in a position where they might have to contribute much less to retirement if they have to contribute at all. So I think it's a very powerful mechanism. But on the other side, also remembering that withdrawing from it for education or other things like that does take away from that the ability to set them up financially.
The intention is long-term wealth for your child. The intention is not to use it for any other needs, and there are other investment vehicles that would be suitable for other investment needs, such as education.
So to make it quite practical, the impact that time has, we recently saw that there was the first tax-free savings millionaire, and that was in the space of about 10 years. So look, that might be the anomaly, the outlier, but if we think of kids having a time frame of 40 to 50 years, if that could have been achieved, or even half of that could have been achieved in 10 years, the impact that time of 40 to 50 years can have for your child is massive.
Let's get into some of the misconceptions around tax-free savings accounts. Some people saying you can use them as emergency funds. That doesn't sound quite right.
We look at the practicalities of a tax-free savings. You're not restricted in terms of liquidity. So at the end of the day, it comes down to intention. Vumi referred to it earlier around planning holistically, and that tax-free savings is a part of a broader portfolio. But yes, to answer your question, I don't think it's the best vehicle to use for emergency savings, and there are other vehicles that are much more suitable for that.
To Johan's point, should you withdraw from a tax-free savings account for a rainy day or using it as a fund for rainy days, it permanently reduces your lifetime allowance, hampering your future tax-free growth.
And is there a point where the taxman can come and say, you withdrew more than 3 times, the 4th time I get to apply taxes? Is there any point, or is it completely tax-free?
At this point in time, Motheo, there's no restrictions in terms of how much you can access. Outside of the tax rules that we've explained, there's no pitfalls. But I think it is important that you as an investor understand this and apply your thinking around how a tax-free works and what the benefits are.
And the best thing, of course, to make it work is to stay in the investment for a very long time. And if you can, do it for your children as well, so it compounds over time.
Absolutely.
Tax-free savings accounts are such a great idea and a great investment. Somebody would say, why can't I put in more than 500,000? And what would be the implications if I did?
Should you over-contribute, Motheo, the funds that you have contributed in excess will be taxed. So it's often best to actually just stick to the rules. As mentioned earlier, having all your investments in one house helps to keep track of that.
So there is that cash from the
There
taxman.
is that cash.
If you do too much,
of course,
they'll come knocking. So before we wrap up this particular conversation, I'd love for each of you to share your key takeaway to our listeners around tax-free savings accounts.
With 36,000 Rand sounding like it can be a lot at times, the best time to start is now, and it's never too late.
Motheo, to add on to that one takeaway, Vumi made a really nice analogy earlier around the 99 Rand per day, which can sound like a small amount, but I think my takeaway for listeners is that you should never underestimate the value of those smaller contributions over time.
Thank you to Vumi and Johan on that insightful conversation around tax-free savings accounts. In the next episode of Everything Counts, we're launching something new, a 4-part vodcast series called Everything Counts Sports Edition. We'll be sitting down with some of Investec's brand ambassadors, including Paralympic gold medalist Mpumelelo Mhlongo, women's golf trailblazer Kayuri Mundli, 2-time rugby world champion Cheslin Colby, and Bafana Bafana superstar Teboho Mokoena to explore the parallels between elite sport and financial success, the discipline, resilience, long-term thinking, and the choices that really matter when the pressure is on. It's a different lens on the same idea, whether in sport or in life, everything counts. I'm Motheo Khoaripe. See you in a fortnight.
The views expressed are those of the contributors at the time of publication and do not necessarily represent the views of the firm and should not be taken as advice or recommendations. Investec Private Banking, a division of Investec Bank Limited, a registered credit provider committed to the Code of Banking Practice as regulated by the National Financial Ombudsman.